上现在是有一个我们北大汇丰未来实验室这样的一个资讯的群组，那大家也可以通过加入到群组中，然后来了解到我们后续更多的这样的一些活动，以及更多和未来、和创新、和创业、和科技有关的一些资讯。那么也是再次感谢大家。我们的活动的话呢，预计也是会在3到5分钟内就开始了，然后也请大家稍事休息。再次感谢。好现场的我们所有的朋友，那么以及说我们今天在线上关注我们未来实验室公开课的各位朋友，大家晚安。那么也是欢迎大家来到我们每个月都有一次的这样的未来实验室的一个公开课的一个现场。那么我是今天的主持人黄志敏，来自于北京大学汇丰商学院创新创业中心。那么也是非常感谢大家关注我们未来实验室以及北大汇丰商学院相关的一些活动，欢迎各位。对，那么也是像刚才说到的，我们今天的活动的话呢，也是提示大家，请将您的这个手机调至震动和静音。同时的话，我们在现场是设有一个同声传译。另外呢，在我们线上的朋友也不用担心，那么我们今天在线上也是会有我们人工智能的一个翻译的实时的一个字幕会在线上的直播中出现的。对，那么今天呢，我们这一场公开课呢，也是由北京大学汇丰商学院未来实验室联合了我们 BCC 创新咨询来共同的举办。那么首先的话呢，也请允许我用很简短的时间来介绍一下这2个机构。那么首先我先介绍一下未来实验室。那么未来实验室呢，是北京大学汇丰商学院创新创业中心下设的一个产业的一个创新平台。那么我们的目标呢，也是去建立一个专注于探索创新创业模式、前沿科学技术、综合应用场景的一个开放式的创新生态平台。那么实验室不仅集合了行业内领先的商业转化单位，更将北大汇丰的顶尖学术资源和庞大的校友网络纳入其中，打造了一个集产、学、研、投、融、创于一体的生态共享型的创业服务平台。那么您也可以通过关注我们 PHBS 创新创业中心以及前海未来实验室的公众号，来获取更多的相关的一些资讯。那么本期我们公开课的合作伙伴 BCC 创新咨询是一家拥有商业化部、团队化部、个人化部、设计思维、机遇变现等创新工具独家授权的这么样的一个创新的咨询公司。其产品呢，服务了超过300家的头部企业，覆盖了近20万的学员，获得了客户、全球合作伙伴的高度认可，以及广泛的行业的一些奖项。那么今年呢，也是迎来了 BCC 将商业模式化部这样的一个工具引进中国的第10个年头。那么因此呢，其实 BCC 的创新中心也是专门邀请了我们待会会为我们带来的分享的 Greg 先生等一系列的海外专家来到深圳去分享他们更多的一些商业的洞见。那么今天是未来实验室 第6期的一个公开课，本期公开课的题目是高维竞争领先的生态系统设计。今天的主讲嘉宾呢，我们很荣幸的邀请到Mr. Greg Bernada 先生Greg 先生，那他是畅销书价值主张设计的联合作者 ，Strategies 国际大师班的主理人，他曾任世界经济论坛联席董事，牛津大学科学创新与社会研究所副研究员。那么作为 Upruption 的概念发起人呢，他也在2023年的时候呢，获得了 Thinkers 50的这个战略奖的提名。那么 Greg 先生呢，引领了世界各地的领导者通力合作，他的客户呢也遍布了各个行业和地区其中也包括了达能、高露洁、米其林、大众、ABB、万事达卡、腾讯、阿里巴巴等知名企业。目前 Greg 先生也正与跨生态系统的领导者和组织合作，创造业务模式，共建为世界创造更多价值的方法与愿景。今天呢 ，Greg 将带领大家从商业模式设计走向利益共创者，进一步探索如何通过设计更领先的企业和商业生态系统，实现超越价值主张和商业模式的创新创造。So now, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Greg Bernada to bring tonight's lecture.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. Let me see if we can connect the slides. All right. Okay, and let's see if this works. Not yet. Yes. Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello. How many of you understand English? Okay, half. Okay, good. Very good. It's good to see you. Thank you so much for having me today. I would love to talk to you about some of these ideas that you see on the screen, from organization to ecosystem, why it's important to think about ecosystem today, and from disruption to upruption. Upruption is a word that I've invented, or that has come to me, because I think that the word disruption means innovation of a certain era, but now we need to embrace innovation in a different way. Now is the time for a different kind of innovation. So I want to talk to you about these ideas. Are we okay with the translation so far? For those who do not understand English? I hope so. Yes? Okay, super. Okay, so first of all, why am I talking to you about this? Just 3 elements of context. A lot of organizations are trying to think about growth, but with the toolbox of, let's say, business as usual, it feels like we are a little bit stuck in ways of thinking that doesn't allow us to create new value in ways that are, powerful for the times that we live in. That's one piece of context. Another piece of context is that if you're in business or government or a not-for-profit organization, you have to care about societal and environmental issues. Even all of us as individuals, we care about environmental or societal issues. But again, with the traditional business or innovation toolbox, it feels like it's too small a toolbox to address these kinds of very complex issues. And a third piece of context comes from this guy. Who has seen this guy before? Funny looking guy, right? He's one of the pioneers, one of the experts of virtual communities, virtual technologies in California. He works a lot with IBM, Microsoft, etc. And He's also one of the people that has written a lot about tech-based business models, tech business models, and the problems with tech business models. Because you know, for example, that a lot of our social media can also create addiction, right? We all have an experience of this. So here is a quote from him that I've heard him say in a podcast. The higher up an executive is at Google and Facebook, the more aggressive they are at limiting screen time for their kids. So this third piece of context talks about the divide we have between our professional lives and our private lives, right? It's as if the most intelligent people among us go to work in the morning and they put all their energies into creating a tool or a system or a technology, and then they go home at night and they tell their kids, don't touch this thing that I've created. It's a little bit schizophrenic. And so I think that we shouldn't have to be living in a system like this. I think that we are creative, intelligent enough that we can now embrace a different way of doing things. So with these three pieces of context, I come to the realization that the language of business is too small for the times that we live in. It's too narrow. We can keep everything that's good about it, but we also have to include other aspects when we talk about value creation and business of the future. And so I like to say that we need to rise to a higher logic of value creation. Why higher logic? Because it needs to encompass all of these things that I've talked about before, going beyond these limitations. But it needs to remain practical and logical, right? This is probably why a lot of us like business, because it's practical, it's a fantastic force. You know, it allows us to deliver value for people in a very concrete way. So we want to keep that, but we also want to expand how we are doing that so that we can create better value. So my word for this is approbation. And approbation, the whole idea is to unlock the level of value creation that you have in your sector. So you might be working in education, in mobility, or in food, in healthcare, whatever it is. We're all working in an ecosystem. And the idea of approbation is to say, well, this ecosystem has a potential, and let's see if we can unlock it to its next level of expression, the next level of evolution. I give you an image for this. If this is the representation of an ecosystem, I will go into a bit more details later on. But often we think about disruption, right? Disruption has been a term. If you go to any incubator or startup, the idea of disruption is the goal, right? To disrupt an industry, to disrupt an ecosystem. The problem with disruption is that it's good if you are the disruptor. It's not so good if you are the organizations or the other people that are being disrupted, okay? So disruption can create winners and losers. It can be me against you. And so that, again, has some merit because it's good to shake things that are a little bit stuck and outdated. But when you shake things up, what you can also do is see if you can bring them up to the next level, right? And so that's approbation. Can you lift an entire sector up to its next level of value creation and lift as many actors as possible in the process as well? And everybody has a role to play in this in such a way that you're helping to lift the sector that you're working in, and that you're obviously capturing value for your own organization as well. Said with words, approbation is three things. One, it produces better value, right? It's an ecosystem that produces better value. Number 2, it functions more efficiently. And number 3, ideally everyone or most people are able to participate and get value out of it as well, right? So that's the North Star of Approption. We try to get all of these things to work together when we are embracing an Approption. So I'll tell you in 3 episodes in my speech tonight how to think practically about these ideas and what we can, how we can bring these ideas into our own context, your own respective contexts. The number 1 message tonight is to shift our thinking to a larger purpose. So let me tell you about my own personal experience and my own inspiration. I used to work, I think you've heard in the introduction, I used to work at the World Economic Forum, and for me it was always very, inspiring. You get lots of people that come together, talk about big issues. But after a while, I was starting to feel like, I don't know if they're really going to change many things, because they sleep in five-star hotels, they eat really good food. If they look outside the window, it looks beautiful, they can go skiing. So in a context like this, it feels like, I don't know if I'm so motivated about changing things, So I worked there until 2008. This is some time ago now, between 2000 and 2008. And I thought, well, I have enough. I want to see some other contexts, because I feel there are other contexts that I can learn from. And so what did I do? I went to China. This was the beginning of a number of visits for me in your country. And I found myself actually in a very similar room talking about very similar topics. This is, we had a forum at the Diaoyu Thai State Guest House. I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly, but in Beijing. Diaoyu Thai, thank you. And we were talking about the same issues, but for me, what impressed me around that time, around 2010, that if I looked outside, there was lots of pollution at the time. And I say this with, a lot of admiration, actually, because for me, it became very meaningful to talk about these systemic issues. The theory that we were talking about in the room was matching a need outside that people recognized. So it wasn't just about pollution, but it was your whole country lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, which has never been done before. And so in the process, we had to deal with things like pollution, but we had to deal with job creation, producing the right amount of healthy food for everyone, and so on and so forth. So you had a context in China that required all of you innovators to start thinking a little bit more broadly than in a context where I was coming from. So for me, it was very inspiring. And so one of these contexts, one of these issues was about job creation. How are we going to create so many jobs to lift people out of poverty and provide value for lots of people? And so I asked around, and at the time, everybody turned me to Taobao. And I mentioned Taobao because I know this is, it's kind of an old story that I'm telling you because this is my first inspiration. But it was really a very powerful inspiration because a lot of people that I talked to told me, well, it actually changed their lives. And so I started to look at Taobao, and this started my exploration of understanding how value creation can be more than what we typically teach at the business schools that I was exposed to at the time. And so then I started to decode and start to understand what these leaders like Jack Ma and the team at the time were doing that is different. And more broadly, what are Approption leaders doing that is different than just simple business leaders? And the first thing is that they don't just have a business purpose. It's not just about business, goals and missions, etc. They have a societal purpose. They have a societal vision. They have something that resonates with the people that they're supposed to serve, and also all of the other businesses and maybe government and foundations, etc., that they need to work with in order to deliver the value that they want to deliver. And this is consistent across many different case studies that I've looked at. I'll just show you 3 that are quite known. So Taobao actually, of course, they sell goods, right? E-commerce, etc. But I actually talked to a number of executives that were working with Jack Ma at the time. They were telling me that the number one mission or the number one even business metric was how many jobs can we create. Job creation was the real thing. If we're able to create jobs, then we're also able to have a business, right? But job creation was number one. Same thing with Tesla, another good example of an ecosystem leader. Tesla, at first everybody was saying, well, it's just about sports electric cars, which is quite cool anyway. But actually, we realized, well, it's a lot more than this. So this is back in 2006. We were only seeing the beginning of it. Now later, we can see it's an entire ecosystem of, okay, many cars, but it's also about the gigafactories. It's about the solar panels, the batteries, the electric generation, etc. And this is a post by Elon Musk in 2006, and he was already telling us that the mission of Tesla is not just about cars, but it's actually transitioning the world towards a solar electric economy. So the car thing was just one part of it. And solar electric economy is a societal vision. It's a societal purpose, right? And that's exciting for a lot of people to participate in this. Another one that is maybe less known, but Roche is a company, pharma company, right? They do drugs, and that's a company we've worked with a lot. They also made the switch from just being a drug manufacturer to, because they could see all of the problems with diseases in the world, the problems around budgets getting challenged in many countries, at the same time as the science advancing. Well, they see a new opportunity to create personalized health for people, right? So you know that there's many, between the data and the science and the diagnostics, now we can know a lot better what is good for a person to get treated with. Now, every company in the world will tell you that they do this on their website, right? Take any website in the world, they will say, yes, we have a societal purpose. But the key difference here is that these companies, they actually deliver on their purpose, on their societal purpose. You can see it in the products and the services that they deliver practically. It actually is these things that they promise. It's not just a marketing statement. All right. And you can see, with Taobao, created millions of jobs. It changed the culture of commerce at the time. It's really a fascinating story. You have the whole story around the Taobao villages that, helped to integrate rural villages into the economy. And Jack Ma at the time was telling us, we're not just creating a company here, we're creating a whole foundation for e-commerce and for entrepreneurship to come forward. So one thing to do when you are starting your journey at any level, you don't need to be a Tesla or a Jack Ma or anyone like this, but to actually really understand how to create value that is fit for the times that we live in, you have to start asking deeper questions. What do people really need? Not just what is in vogue or what is, exciting. What needs to get unstuck in the system? If we unstuck the system in this way, maybe it will liberate or unlock value creation. What's the highest potential? If you ask some of these questions, what you get is new meaning for people. New meaning is basically what people are feeling inside themselves and their bodies without actually being able to tell you this is what I want, right? But meaning is the difference between the experience I have now and what I really want to feel in myself in the future. And once you are getting to new meaning, well, it's kind of easy to get to value creation, which we all talk about in business, right? Because once you have really understood what people want and what they're passionate about and what they crave, well, then you can figure out how to bring it to them. And so just to give you this example with Taobao, what I found really interesting is that Taobao kind of shifted the paradigm of commerce for China. Not the only company, but it was a very a leading company that helped to go from the physical economy, which was, had a number of problems, etc., but lifting it up to a digital economy. But it wasn't just about technological change. The meaning that the team understood was that for China at the time, it was all about economic independence, creating jobs for people. It was about unleashing entrepreneurship, the talent of people in the country for entrepreneurship, and creativity as well, right? And so understanding this allowed them to have a North Star that, got them to understand how to create a system that really created value for hundreds of millions of people. Okay, so that was number one, the idea of shifting from a business mission to a societal purpose. Number two, you also have to back it up with thinking more broadly about how you create value at a very practical level. So this second message is all about shifting from just focusing on your organization to understanding the dynamics of value creation in an ecosystem. Who knows this guy and the business model canvas, who has used the business model canvas, being in a business school? Anyone else? A few people? Okay, I assume more people now. Okay, so I'm showing this because this is part of a series of books, maybe you recognize some of them, that is a story of, or a methodology rather, of how we can understand innovation and business value creation. And so, when we look at Taobao, just to take this example that I've used now, we can see that they had, this is what we call a business model, right? That's why I'm asking you, that's why I'm showing you this. So this is the first business model of Taobao in 2003. I'm not going to go into the details, but I'm showing you this because as we are using these tools, we can understand that Taobao did basically a reinvention of business models, one after another, and this only goes to 2008, just the beginning, but they kept reinventing themselves through business model innovation. And as you might know, maybe you've tried to do one business model in your life, and you know that's already very hard to do one business model right. Or it's even harder to reinvent yourself and do another business model and another business model, and all of them being successful, right? So this is a story of going from just being a free platform to going to being the Taobao platform, and then the Tmall platform, and then they kept building after again, right? But I'm showing you this because I discovered during this study that there were also other things that I couldn't quite put in the business model box. There were things that I saw that are not typically what businesses do. Things like building trust in the economy, with the two-way review system. At the time was something new, so it created trust, and then when trust was online, everybody was more comfortable to share and do commerce with each other. Building the digital payment platforms that didn't exist before. facilitating the emergence of a whole industry of shipping. This is 20 years ago, but normally when you're a business, you arrive somewhere and you think, well, there should be some infrastructure, there should be some services that I plug myself to so that my business will be successful. Here is a story of, no, these things weren't existing, but the Taobao team took the responsibility to actually create them one by one. Integrating new value chains, building a university to train people, and so on and so forth. So this, I realized, was not just like a business. It was more like managing a country, right? You have to think about setting the prices, building the infrastructure, managing the conflicts between people, and so on and so forth. So now if I take this little study of Taobao and I generalize it to try and understand how we can think about innovation at a more practical level, well, I think there's maybe 3 levels of value creation that we need to have right. The number one is what we can call the value proposition. So this is our canvas, the value proposition canvas. Maybe you've seen this, one of the books. And so this is the first foundation of value creation. Like GoPro, you need to understand who your customers are. That's your customers, right? Sport enthusiasts here in terms of GoPro. And then you need to understand what value you create for them. So these cameras that you attach on helmets. That's great. That's the foundation. It's what we call product market fit, and you need to have it. But as we know, it's not as powerful as competing at the level of business model innovation. So now what you see around the value proposition are all of these elements that are forming a business model. There's more things to include, and so it's more complex, but if you manage, it's also more powerful to create better value and be stronger in the market. So the example that we always use is the Nespresso example. Who knows Nespresso? Coffee machines? Okay? So you may know that the company who invented Nespresso, Nestlé, actually invented these coffee machines, and for 10 years they were not successful to make it into the market. Why? Because they were using the same model that they were using for all the other products. They were a B2B company, Nestlé, and they were trying to sell these coffee machines through a B2B business model template. And then they realized, well, nobody in organizations are interested in coffee machines because they already have one. So this is a consumer experience. This should be a B2C business model. So they changed it without changing the product. And this is the key thing. Without changing the product, they change only these elements around. For example, creating a brand around George Clooney, hiring George Clooney for the brand, opening a shop in the Champs-Élysées in Paris, creating a club atmosphere, working with the patents to prevent other manufacturers to produce the coffee pods to go in the machine. So they had a whole system around the product that allowed them to create a very, very successful business model. Millions of revenues per year for a few decades for Nestlé. So this was one of the very successful businesses of Nestlé. Now this is only the second level or the second lens of value creation. Of course, today I'll talk to you about this third lens, the lens of the ecosystem. Now normally, when we think about ecosystem, you see these things appear around it. We think about, okay, ecosystem means environment. And normally the way business people think is that they have to check if, competitors are doing already something, is the economic climate the right one, what will users and customers want in the future, and so on and so forth. And so they have a defensive or reactive way of analyzing the environment to see if their ideas fit for the time. But these ecosystem leaders are thinking about this in a very different way. So for example, Tesla, they innovated at the level of the product for the cars. They innovated at the level of the business model, right, going directly to the consumer. But especially, they innovated at the level of the ecosystem. So they didn't just react. They did things. For example, they partnered with competitors, Toyota and Mercedes. They built a massive infrastructure, right, of charging stations. They developed very deep technology that normally a university or government does. They created the demand because people in their minds, you may or may not remember this, but an electric car before Tesla was something that would drive maybe 30 kilometers and only 2 people, right? So in the minds of people, it was impossible. So the point here is that these ecosystem leaders, they take a much larger view of value creation to understand how they can create value in a way that is even more complex than the business model, in a way that takes more into account so that it's even more powerful in the market. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, just raise your hand, at what level of value creation do you think you are playing in whatever organization or role you have right now? Are you playing at the level of the value proposition? Let's see, raise your hand, or let me do it this way. Are you playing at the level of value proposition, business model, ecosystem? Who says value proposition? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Who says we are definitely very good at business model in what we're doing? Okay, we have 1, 2, 3. And who says, well, actually, right now we're building ecosystems and we're reinventing whole ecosystem? We have at least 1 here. Okay, fantastic. So most people, they're still trying to figure out exactly what level of value creation they're playing at, right? Now, for an ecosystem leader, I'll give you a metaphor here. If an ecosystem leader was to go to a business school, you know, take Elon Musk going to a business school, and normally in a business school you have at some point, maybe you have it here as well, you have a practical case to do, you know, yourself. You have to build a business, for example. Well, imagine Elon Musk going in front of the professor and the professor saying, let's check about your idea about electric vehicles. Let's see, you know, if this is a good idea, if it has potential for business. So normally the professor would ask a number of these questions. Is there a market for electric cars? Is the technology available? Is there an infrastructure? Do you know that people want electric cars? Have you gone and talked to people about it? Can they afford it? Is the right timing? Elon Musk would have to answer pretty much no to every one of these questions, right? Why? Because this is the point of an ecosystem. We have to create a new market. Of course it doesn't exist. It's too small, right? Of course we have to invent the technology. Maybe we don't have to do it alone, but we have to invent the technology, build the infrastructure. We have to inspire people. Like I said to you, an electric car before Tesla, people just thought of an electric car as something that couldn't drive long distance or couldn't be a sports car. So you have to show them, you have to inspire them. That's the work of an ecosystem leader. Maybe they cannot pay for it, so maybe you find another way, another system, another model so that they can afford it. So you see the point. They're thinking a lot broader than this way that we've been taught to think about business, you know, in a traditional way. And you have more and more people that are thinking this way. So the ecosystem leaders, I like to say they would fail the business school test. And actually a lot of people, you know, went out of business school. But you don't have to do that. You can, of course, you know, inside the organizations, they're very good at business as well. But not only business. They're also playing this game that is much larger than business, which is the ecosystem game, right? To create and unlock much higher value. So if a business guy is a business CEO, is just focused on their house, an ecosystem leader has their mind open to understand the whole village and care for the whole village, or sometimes even build the whole village. That means, of course, they take care of their own house, but they also build the schools, build the roads, build the sewage system, all of these things that make the village work. All right? So they think like a mayor rather than think like a CEO, right? A mayor has to care, of course, their own house. They want to live in a good place. That's not the problem. Their job description is about making the whole village work. Okay, so now this stuff is not new. If you look at anything that is really inspiring in terms of innovation of the last 100 years, that have changed lives, that have taken people to one level of well-being to another level of well-being, well, all of these weren't just about purely entrepreneurship. It was all about actually building ecosystems. And this is the past, but in the future, this is a book by McKinsey. McKinsey tells us, well, the future is also about ecosystem. For them, they say it's the single largest economic transformation in the history of the planet. 1/3 of global GDP will soon come from ecosystems. Why? Because they see that this way of thinking about business in categories, for example, industries, well, that is too artificial and too old. Right now, what matters is really understanding the societal context, understanding what people want, and then mobilizing the assets, creating assets, and weaving them in a proper way that delivers the value that you really want to create. So these are just some of the ecosystems that we are looking at, and some of them that we are involved in helping with. I'm showing you this because ecosystems can be of many different sizes. It can be big, it can be small, it can be global, it can be local. It can be very business-oriented, it can be not-for-profit. It doesn't really matter, right? The whole idea is that there's a whole bunch of people right now that are raising their game to the level of ecosystem value creation. There's different kinds of ecosystems, and you can think of them in 4 different boxes or different orientations. Some have more or less control, right? So they are very directive, or they're very loose about who actually has power and control in the ecosystem. And some have more or less coordination. So they are always meeting and coordinating with one another, or they're just saying, no, we have the same philosophy and we're just moving forward. And so there's different names for these ecosystems, from facilitated ecosystem to centralized to distributed to directive ecosystem. And if I take some of these examples here that I had before, you can see that they can align to these things. And of course, we could map a lot more examples here. But I want to show you one, actually not this one, another one, Intel, because I think this is an interesting example of the 90s. So it's a classic historic example, but it's something that is quite interesting for the times that we're living right now because of this AI revolution. So we don't know what the AI ecosystem is starting to look like. We can observe that. But we have an interesting example here of a company that was in a very similar context. And it's always interesting to look at history to see what might happen in the future. So to talk about Intel, we first have to talk about the state of the PC industry in the 80s. The state of the PC industry in the 80s was that you had one player, IBM, that was producing everything in a computer. The keyboard, the mainframe, the screen, the peripherals, the software, the components, etc. And so when you have one company that does everything, it's very easy to integrate everything, right? And of course, you had, level 1 of a PC. But then they started to mature a little bit, and you had more specialization in the PC industry. So you had all of these actors that started to do their own versions of the screen and keyboards and all these components inside, etc. Now, you had a different problem, is that, okay, great to have specialization, but nobody really there to integrate everything and, propel it forward in a particular direction. And in the 90s, a PC is not something very sexy. It's something, bubbling, but there's not a lot of energy behind it yet. But Intel, so I show you the business model of Intel, and I show you this because they were in a particular situation. They had a lot of power, Intel. They were selling microprocessors to the manufacturers of PCs. They were making a revenue stream from that. And they had technology on their side. Who knows about Moore's Law? A number of you will know about Moore's Law, good. So Moore's Law was basically telling us that the power of a microprocessor doubles every 18 months, more or less. Okay? So as a business, Intel, for them, means that they don't just sell microprocessors, they sell every 18 months, they can sell you more power to the PC manufacturers, right? Thanks to technology. The problem was PC manufacturers were not interested. They didn't want power because they didn't know what to do with power, okay? This is not the exciting industry that it is now. They don't have a need for more performance. From an end user perspective, a PC is simply used to do, spreadsheets and starting to browse the internet in very low way, Word, etc., right? So we don't really need more power. And from the perspective of the industry, well, Intel realized that if Intel does an innovation, but then all of the other suppliers like Microsoft, they don't follow this innovation, it's completely worthless, right? It's like being a village and building a big power plant, but nobody needs power, and there's also no power lines to bring it to the citizens. Okay, so what are they going to do? Because here at that point, they have 80% market share. So they're not going to grow by selling, getting to 100% market share. It's not very significant. So growth needs to come from somewhere else. It needs to come from more reasons to use a computer. So they create something called the Intel Architecture Labs. Now, I could ask you this, but we're going to skip this. I'll tell you what they have done. Andy Grove, the CEO, founder of Intel, said, we established the Intel Architecture Labs to respond to this vacuum, this absence of leadership in the PC industry. The Intel Architecture Labs was a physical lab at Intel in Oregon with 450 people working for it. And basically, they did two different things. The first thing is, I told you ecosystem leaders need to inspire people. Well, that's one thing that they've done. Intel invested a lot into what could a PC do in the future for people. So one thing they invested in is to look at the future of communication between us. So video conferencing, the reason why we have Zoom and all of these things today was partly thanks to the research of Intel. Another thing was the connected home, which is starting to come forward as well, right? So these were two things out of many where Intel said, look, industry, here's what a computer can do in the future. Isn't that fantastic? Don't you want to participate? You need to engage the rest of the ecosystem. You need to inspire them. Now, the other thing they've done is that they realized, well, inspiration is not going to be enough. We also have to do something else. We have to go and zoom out to our ecosystem. What is our ecosystem? Well, it's basically all of the players of the motherboard of a PC, right? All of these component manufacturers, etc. It's like a village, and you have all of the different factories in the village, right? And the problem is, this village, there's not a lot of bridges that allow the communications, allow the people to see each other and to do commerce and trade with each other. So what Intel did is that they created what is called the PCI bus, peripheral component interconnect. Doesn't matter what it means. The key thing is that it allowed to connect all of these different pieces of the motherboard in a much more efficient way. Again, it's like creating a bridge in the village or creating the power line between the power plant and all of the places where the power needs to go. Now, more power enables these visions that Intel put forward, video conferencing, the connected home, right? So on one hand, they inspired the ecosystem. On the other hand, they said, look, we're making it easy for you to actually join and allow this new vision to become a reality. And so, of course, for them, so they created this new value proposition, the PCI bus, and that helped all of the PC manufacturers to adopt it and to start joining this world of making these visions happen. Because all of these software companies, they started to say, oh yeah, I can provide something towards video conference, and so on and so forth. And of course, for Intel, then it meant that people wanted to have increasingly more powerful microprocessors now, because everybody was excited to imagine and to make a new future possible. So it increased their sales as well. Now, they also had to do this by a lot of coordination. So they did what they called Plugfest, where they brought all of the members of the industry in hotels in Vegas or in Miami, and they tested the PCI bus. Everybody connected their system to see if it worked or not. And then it led to the creation of an industry consortium that's still active today with other members of the PC industry that basically rules over the standards of the PC industry. So I'm showing you this because one company, Intel, really went from being a simple citizen in the village, right, looking after their own house, to taking a much broader responsibility of architecting the industry, right, the PC industry. Why did they do that? Because they realized that it was only by going to this level of the ecosystem that things would unlock, that new value would be able to be created. And of course, they've done that because they could also see that themselves, as an organization, as a citizen in the village, would be able to benefit from it. All right. Now, I'll give you a little bit more about the language around ecosystems, because as you've seen before, we kind of have these different levels of tools that are all embedded in one another, and we can ask ourselves, well, what does the language around ecosystem, what does a tool around ecosystem look like? What are the parts of an ecosystem that we can activate? So there's three essential parts. One is economic actors. In an ecosystem, as you've seen with Intel, you have to realize it's not just you and an environment. You have many different actors that compose the ecosystem. And so the key thing is to understand what is the right constellation of actors that you can create that allows you to deliver on your societal purpose or on your collective purpose. And these are some of the organizations that Intel mobilized, all of the ones in the industry consortium, and later on all of the gaming company. NVIDIA was part of this as well at the beginning. And what is interesting to see is that there is often new actors that are being invited in a new ecosystem. Because if you want to create new value, you better do it also with new people. Right? Now, number two building block is the infrastructure. Infrastructure means that, well, again, in your village, you will see that there are some bridges, but maybe some bridges are lacking. There is some holes in the floor. And so you, as an ecosystem leader, you have to care for these things. And you've seen the example of the PCI bus that Intel did in their case. There's different types of infrastructure. It can be physical infrastructure, like Tesla charging stations, can be digital like Alipay at the beginning of Taobao, or organizational. You may know about Hire. Hire is a very popular case globally. I don't know to what extent you studied it, but you know, Hire is a great example of a company that has broken themselves into micro-enterprises, but then supported micro-enterprises with an organizational ecosystem, with blockchain, smart contract, that allows them to cooperate, right? So be agile and collaborative at the same time. The third component is what we call communal functions. In your neighborhood, someone picks up the trash, right? You put it at the end of your street or outside your house. Well, there's someone that comes and picks up the trash to ensure that the village or your neighborhood works well. So communal functions are all of these activities that are making the whole function well and helping maybe some actors participate or join the ecosystem. In the case of Intel, it's represented by these Plugfests in Miami, in Las Vegas, etc. There is a number of communal functions that keep coming up. One I've told you about before, Inspire. So inspiring the ecosystem is a communal function. Upskilling members of the ecosystem, allowing them to have the skills to participate in the new world that you're creating, like the Taobao University. Enabling the ecosystem is another strategy. You may know that Tesla, they created this amazing technology, electric engines, and then they said, well, everybody in the industry can have our patents for free. Why would they do that? Well, to enable, to make it easier for this whole new industry of the electric cars to become possible. If other competitors are coming into the system, well, it makes the pie bigger for everyone, right? Everybody starts to talk about electric cars. There's many more options. Consumers are buying electric cars, and the pie becomes bigger. Financing, sometimes in the case of Amazon Kindle, Amazon had to finance the publishers to join the ecosystem, to convince them to join the ecosystem. Otherwise, it would not have been possible. So you have to use different strategies. Maybe one last one, regulate. I don't know if you've ever heard about this, Facebook Oversight Board. Who has heard about this? Yeah? So it's the equivalent, it's like in America, you have the Supreme Court, you know? So it's the equivalent of the Supreme Court. Some questions, because Facebook has become a huge thing, 2 billion people, some decisions are important to be decided independently from the Facebook management. So they created this board of independent advisors who can rule over some decisions for the benefit of the community. I show you this because when we talk about ecosystem, you have to start thinking about who makes the decisions, what is fair, how is power represented, how is power legitimate, which is always going to be a different answer depending on where you live, what is the context, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now you see we can understand the different building blocks that are useful for us to keep in mind as we're building ecosystem. The whole idea here is that you're going up levels of complexity to create a story of value creation that is always more elaborate, more sophisticated, and more powerful to unlock more value in the sector you want to work with. Okay, the last episode, it's a much shorter one, is that this ability to work at ecosystem actually requires us to upgrade our leadership capability as well. Who knows about this guy? Carl Jung. Okay. From my hometown of Zurich, Switzerland, actually. I show you this guy, why? Because here's what he says. So he was a psychoanalyst, psychologist, right? He says an analyst or a therapist can help his patient just as far as he himself has gone and not a step further, right? So that means that as we're working at this much more complex level of value creation, which requires dealing with paradoxes, with complexities, with relationships that, you know, some are conflictual, some are amicable. It's very complex. If every time that you are facing one of the situations you feel like, oh no, it's too much for me, that's going to be difficult. So we also have to build the internal resilience, the capability to broaden our mindset, to broaden our capacity to hold these different tensions so that we're able to work effectively at this level of complexity that is higher, right? And now, for those who are interested in this kind of thinking, there's a very good article. It's a classic. It's one of the top 10 HBR articles. Maybe some of you have seen it. 7 Transformation of Leadership. And they tell us there's actually different levels of leaders in organizations. At the lowest level is the opportunist, the first one up there. The opportunist is all about their personal gain. They don't have a lot of complexity, of tolerance for complexity. They're like, you know, it's either I win or you win, but we cannot win together, right? For example. But all the way at the bottom is the highest level of leadership. They call it alchemists. Now, alchemists don't have a problem of personal gain, you against me. They actually have transcended these questions. They feel fine. They can take care of themselves. They understand that you and I can benefit. It's fine. We can all live together in a way that everybody gets what they need. And they're there to actually, you know, help with societal level transformations. These are very different mindsets. These are different profiles that are all accessible to us as we continue to grow as individuals. And so my encouragement is to both in our external world, to look at the external world and start approbtions, what I call approbtions, meaning to work at the level of the collective, to work at the level of the societal and of the ecosystem, at the same time as graduating through these different levels of personal power, personal capacity to deal with all of these different complexities that we see in the world. So you can ask yourself, what is your mindset? Is it that of an opportunist? You know, you're all about your personal gain. Are you more a diplomat? It's, I'm playing nice with you. Or are you the level of an expert? You're just focused on your stuff and you're, you know, just focused on your lane, on your expertise. Maybe you start becoming an achiever where you say, okay, there's some short-term wins, some long-term goals I'm able to balance. Here, an individualist start to say, well, you know, maybe the way we've done things in our organization can be upgraded. You know, we don't need to only do the things that we've done in the past. Strategist starts to really think about vision and systemic impact. And then the alchemist, as I said, is actually one who can integrate personal, organizational, and societal transformations all in one. What is important to say also, and I'll finish here, is that an alchemist is not against these ones. An alchemist is able to do every one of these things. So it's like the Russian dolls, you know, where you are able to do something and then you transcend this and are able to do something else and something else and something else. So there you go. This is my last slide. So we've seen kind of 2 stretches that I'm encouraging you to do in your external world as well as in your internal world, internal mindset. The shift from just my organization to the ecosystem, just me and the collective. And then with that, to understand, you know, to capture the meaning of our time and elevate the value, elevate the system that you're working on or working in to its next level of expression, its next level of evolution. That's what I call approbation, and thank you very much. And if those of you, so there's a number of people that are around the world that are starting to rally around this idea of approbation. if some of you are really interested in this, I'm offering for special Chinese New Year, 2 times 30 minutes free consultation. We can do this when I'm back in Zurich in February or mid-February. I can only offer 2 spots, but if you're interested, you can send me an email here, and we can talk about either an idea, a project, or a story that you have heard that you feel resonates with the ideas that I've shared with you today. Thank you so much, and maybe you have some questions.
So really thanks Mr. Greg for today's sharing. 那也是再次感谢我们 Greg 先生今天带来的一个精彩的分享。那么今天其实 Greg 其实用了1个晚上的时间去跟我们去诠释了为什么我们要从功能到价值主张到商业模式，再到现在我们在说的如何去创造属于我们自己的商业或企业的一个生态系统，以及我们的领导力在我们的领导者本身在这样的一个过程中需要去做到一些什么样的转型，或者是做好一个角色的定位。那么事不宜迟，我相信今天现场有蛮多的朋友是会有一些疑问，或者说是有一些提问，是想去跟我们 Greg 先生来做这样的一个交流的。那我们也是把更多的时间现在交给我们现场的朋友。请问我们现场有哪一些朋友有提问可以举手 ？OK， 这位女士。
About if I wanted to invite teachers and students and their parents to join about their kids to shine in the stage, but I've made some problems, and I don't know what kind of the practical ways because I'm really inspired by your speaking. It just gave me a very broad mindset. It's like very something I equal with the mindset about think like a mayor, not just about yourself. I'm very equal with that because my partner, she also told me that we can create more balanced values, not just about educated kids, but also about the parents and that like the ecosystem you mentioned today. So this is my question about it.
Fantastic question. Thank you so much for your question. So I would answer in 2 ways. One is often when we believe something and we're passionate about something, we can see that the world is not like this. And we can have the tendency of saying, oh, I'm gonna change this, I'm gonna push against this. And this is difficult because as soon as you push people, they start to resist a little bit. And so the idea of playing at the level of ecosystem or approbation is rather to say, no, I'm going to include all of you into my world. So I'm not going to push you and force you, but I'm going to use a language and I'm going to create value for you so you can join. So this is a mindset shift just to think about. The second thing is a lot of these ecosystems, they start small, right? So they don't start with million members and, 100 companies that are collaborating or something. Often it starts with just one partner. And if you can show with just the one partner that is maybe a different partner but complementary to you, if you can show that your collaboration is creating something new, then a third and a fourth and a 5th person will say, oh, wait, what are they doing? This is very interesting. And this is the same dynamic at the individual level, if you're working as an individual, as it is if you are an organization. I have plenty of stories like this, but one that comes to mind is a story of India where they reduced the price of heart surgery by, 100 times. This was one organization, a hospital, together with an insurance company that created something. And then the government saw and they said, oh my God, they've done something interesting. I'm going to help them. I'm going to invest a lot of money in this because now my money will be much better invested in what they're doing. So a third partner joined, and then more and more partners joined like that. So one other, and this one other should resonate with you. You shouldn't have to force them. But someone who thinks a little bit like you is excited. Let's do together. Let's show the world that there is something here worth doing.
Okay, so next question. Samuel.
我想请教一下，就是您认为领先的生态系统是被设计出来的，还是说由于创始人或创始团队强大的愿力和发心自然生长出来的？同时就是因为我们今天看到了很多案例都是比较大的这些品牌，那有没有可能您观察到一些小的非常有生命力的，能够去代表未来的领先的生态系统的这样您观察到的比较小的品牌？谢谢。
我给大家翻译一下吧。刚才的问题就是说 You think that all the ecosystems are designed, purposely designed, or just naturally grow, or because of the strong leadership that leads, just leading this ecosystem building? And do you have any practical cases to show us, the ecosystem start from like a small companies or small organizations? Yeah.
Thank you for your question. So I think that ecosystem is a term that comes from nature. In nature, actually everything is ecosystems. If you look at the galaxies, that's an ecosystem. If you look at a forest, that's an ecosystem. If you look at what's inside our bodies, they are ecosystems. They're like bubbles of life. They're natural ways that how life works. As human beings, we also belonging to ecosystems, but sometimes we forget our role in participating. We become selfish, or we become dominant, or we become passive, and then these ecosystems are like, bleh, a little bit like this. They don't hold the coherence that they are supposed to have. So, therefore, I think ecosystems are a natural thing, but if humans are participating willingly and consciously in maintaining them, in bringing them their energy and their strength, they become what they are supposed to be, which is natural. So now, if you see these different examples, there's always a theme, right? So solar electric economy, job creation, future of the PC industry. These are ways for us as individuals, as human beings, to mobilize our energy so that we remember that we can consciously participate and actually create something new, actually participate in the evolution of our society and value creation and the world and so on and so forth. So that's for the first part of your question. The second part was, remind me? Yeah, examples, yeah. So I show you this global example. I also said there's many different examples that are starting very small. They're less known, but just a week ago I had someone in Argentina who said, we have built an ecosystem, me and my father, two people, in the real estate industry. We had a dream to make people in Argentina homeowners, right? Being able to buy their own home. Now, you may know that in Argentina, inflation is crazy. Inflation the last 10 years was something like 16,000%, when in the US it's maybe 15 in the last 10 years, right? So that makes it almost impossible for someone to buy a home. So they said, we still have this dream, so what did we do? Well, we didn't just provide the houses. We realized people also needed a way to finance their houses in a very different way. So we created that. That was missing. We created that. And then people needed a way to save. So financial education needed to be completely changed. So they created also the equivalent of a school for people, to educate people. And you see, they started to create different things, not just one business, but different pieces of the puzzle, connecting them together. And today, there are 193 employees, and they've made 3,000 people in Argentina homeowners. And they are a thriving business. And yeah, that's a great story of still a small ecosystem that went from 2 people to 200 that has used the exact same principles. And I would add, this is really interesting in places where the context is difficult. You know, high inflation, or in Africa, there's lots of examples of ecosystem because the infrastructure is missing, or government is not really doing something that they're supposed to do. And they come in and they have a much broader way of understanding how to create value by plugging these holes and connecting the dots together.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'd like to share my opinion in Chinese. 我想说的是，就不同的国家的制度结构和监管的结构的不同背景下的这个商业模式设计，它是通用的吗？比如说资本主义国家、社会主义国家，如果面对不同的监管结构和制度背景不同的话，它的这个商业模式设计是通用的吗？如果不是的话，怎么样做一些改进呢？谢谢。
Speaking of the business model, especially this ecosystem business model, because there's different countries with different policies, different cultures, different municipal from the government. So is there any, if there are some differences, how can we sort of manage, or just in terms of the business model or ecosystem design?
Yeah, it's interesting. You remember maybe the 4 types of ecosystems? So this is very much depending on the context also. So, one story I shared a little bit about Roche. Roche was doing this personalized healthcare in Canada. And in Canada, a pharma company, so for personalized healthcare, you need to have data, patient data. So you need to collect all this patient data. In Canada, nobody will allow a pharma company to own patient data. It's illegal and it's too much power for a pharma company. So what they had to do is to do a facilitated ecosystem where they worked with, they created a not-for-profit organization, and they worked with a patient organization, university, research group, other pharma company. They all belong to this not-for-profit organization, and this not-for-profit organization was able to acquire the patient data and define how the patient data was used. Now, this is the right answer in Canada, because Canada will not allow a pharma company to gather all of this, right? But then you have other contexts where maybe the right way, because it's collaboration is too difficult, the right way, and you see many examples around the world where it's one player, very centralized ecosystem or directive ecosystem. One player comes in, and because of their power, of their leadership, of their maybe financial power and so on, are able to say, we're building the ecosystem ourselves, right? And of course, you have plus, pros and cons, because now this is good, but maybe it's too much power. I don't know, right? But so these are the questions that you deal with depending on the context. There's not one right way or wrong way to do it, but it's more about what does the context allow, what does the context require for you to use one strategy versus another. Yeah.
就你好，我想问一下，就好像大部分商业模式最终是奔向垄断的，就这个会不会与这个生态系统的这个理论有冲突？因为好像大部分行业的这个价值链会比较短，比如说大疆可能就占据了整个无人机市场90%的市场份额，然后导致其他玩家没有活路。然后比如说您刚刚举的这个淘宝的例子，可能这个淘宝打造的电商的生态系统，它破坏了原来的实体行业的生态系统，就有可能它会导致这个就业人数反而减少了。就不知道您对这些问题有什么看法？
Okay. If you look at all these business models, eventually it goes to kind of a monopoly. Monopoly the certain industry. For instance, the example you give to the Taobao, it's a kind of sort of interrupt the small business market. Eventually, maybe lower the employer rate in the market. Yeah. And also, let's give another example of Dajiang is one of the local, the Chinese drone company. Yeah. It's basically can take the 50% of the market share. Yeah. So some small players got no space to develop. So is there kind of have sort of like a conflict with the ecosystem? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that's a very good question, a little bit similar to this one here, which is, for not every ecosystem is an uproption, There are ecosystems that are concentrating value for themselves and getting things stuck, right? Ideally, we're doing the right thing, depending on the context, but also to bring everybody upwards so that we create a new playing field where every small company is now empowered to do their own thing, I think, I don't know enough now, but at the beginning, I think Taobao was like this because it created a new platform where a lot of new businesses could start. And then maybe, this is a little bit the life of organization or the life of anybody in power for too long. They hold on to power. And but that's as much as possible you want to think about this in the design of an ecosystem. And there are other ecosystems that are a lot more empowering. One that I had on my chart here at the opposite end of the spectrum is something like Bitcoin or Ethereum. This is supposed to say, here's something, a new platform, it empowers people. I'm not saying good or bad, etc. But the idea, empower everyone, and we don't control you. We don't tell you what to do. It's just for you to be empowered to do something new. So these are some considerations to think about. Also at a personal level, the one person I'm following was saying the creator of Bitcoin created, I don't know what, $4 trillion of value, but he didn't keep this for himself, So it's always a balance, and this is also why this links to the leadership development. If you're only creating an ecosystem because you're an opportunist, you're going to tend to try to concentrate value for yourself. But if you've graduated and you feel self-confident and you know you can take care of yourself, and you know you're here to also serve, then you don't need to capture all that money for yourself. Capture a little bit for yourself, but allow other people to create and capture value for themselves as well. Yeah.
Okay, so once again, thank you, Mr. Greg. So please have a seat.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for your questions.
好，也是再次感谢我们 Greg 先生今天带来的一个非常精彩的一个分享。那么其实就像是我们未来实验室的一个初衷啊，也是希望将更多的好的创新的这样的一些企业的经营发展的一些新的方法论和方式，以及说更多一些产业新的一些变革可以更快的去带给大家。那么也请大家可以去关注到我们前海未来实验室的公众号，同时的话呢，也可以扫码我们旁边的未来实验室的一个报名链接，然后也是欢迎大家来加入到我们北大汇丰未来实验室的一个生态当中。那么在最后的话呢，也是提示一下，因为刚才也是卖了个小关子，就是我们今天在现场去提问的4位朋友的话呢，也将会获得我们 Greg 先生亲自签名的这样的一本跟商业模式有关的一个书籍。那么也请大家稍后呢可以到我们的reception 去拿一下，好吧？好，就是我们现在老师拿在手上的这样的一个书籍，也是恭喜大家。那么我们最后也请大家坐在我们的座位上，然后一起来拍一张大合影。So now let's take a photo together. Okay. Just here. Just sit in your seat. Yeah.
对，好，可以，所有人看这边。对，好，看我们镜头啊，对，好，来，1、2、3，笑容啊，保持。好。 好，我一起可以点个赞，来一张。对对对，好，来1、2。OK。
好，那么也是再次感谢大家在我们这样的一个夜晚来到我们前海中医研究院进行今天这样的一个公开课的一个聆听。那么也是再次感谢Thank you for Mr. Greg。那么稍后的话呢，我们在现场其实还可以再有一些交流。那么也是欢迎大家可以持续的在现场有一些互动。同时的话呢，也是期待大家关注我们后续的一些活动。那同时的话呢，今天的公开课也将会在我们的未来实验室，还有我们的那个 PHBS 创新创业中心会有我们的一个直播回放。如果大家对于今天的内容有一个回炉的一个感兴趣的过程，也可以在线上去进行我们的一个再次的一个聆听。好，再次感谢大家，晚安。
还有第一个提问的这位女士，也可以来我们的前台领一下你们的礼物。可以买到，应该。这个你可以问一下这位陆同学，我们是北大汇丰的，所以谢老师，这个是不客气，对，是他的书，他有签名，是中文翻译版的。我介绍了。签在哪？在这儿。好，在这儿。BCC 不是这个苏菲的。还有一位。是啊，今天怎么会有时间来？好，我们还有一位提问的观众朋友没有在我这里领到书，好像。好，请各位拿用了这个同传耳机的朋友们，在我们的签到处哪里拿到的耳机还到哪里去，谢谢。